You are listening to the official podcast of the Mutual UFO Network.
Welcome, once again, to the official MUFON podcast. I'm Richard Beckwith. Prepare to journey into the depths of aviation mysteries and unexplained phenomena. Today we are honored to feature Michael Schratt, an aviation historian and private pilot who has dedicated over 25 years to investigating UFO encounters. He is renowned for his meticulous research, having reviewed a minimum of 50,000 historical cases preserved at archives such as the Center for UFO Studies and the legendary Leonard Stringfield files. What sets Michael's work apart is his commitment to resurrecting lost, forgotten, and obscure UFO history. Through detailed forensic illustrations and commissioned artwork based on actual case files and eyewitness reports, he strives to bring these unbelievable stories to life for the public. His extensive research covers a wide range of phenomena, including early mystery airships, classic disc sightings, humanoid encounters, alleged UFO crash retrievals, and unidentified submerged objects, or USOs, noting that USOs represent a significant portion of cases often overlooked. Michael also delves into the highly classified world of alleged man-made advanced aerodynamic vehicles, or ARVs, and black projects, often drawing on first-hand witness testimonies and analyzing characteristics to differentiate them from potential non-human craft. A recognized figure in the field, Michael Schratt is a collaborator on the book Disclosure, An Illustrated History, with Dr. Stephen Greer. He has appeared on numerous media platforms and spoken at various UFO conferences, driven by a dedication to preserving and sharing this vital, often ignored history. Tonight, Michael Schratt will share his unparalleled insights and stunning visual reconstructions, offering a rare glimpse into documented encounters that the public has largely been kept from seeing. Get ready to expand your understanding of the unexplained. Michael Schratt, welcome to the MUFON podcast.
Hello, Richard. Good to be with you.
I appreciate you being here.
I'm happy to be with your group.
I think we may have met at a symposium a few years ago. It might have been maybe in Newport Beach, or it might have been maybe in Las Vegas. I imagine you've been to a couple of symposiums in Las Vegas. And I've been going to them every year for many, many years now, but I always have a lot of fun at those things. And I'm looking forward to seeing you this year at the symposium in July 17th through the 21st in Cincinnati. And you're going to talk about
retrievals of the third kind.
Right. And that includes, sometimes and sometimes not, crash retrievals, right?
Yeah, it's really an homage to the research done by Leonard Stringfield. That's what this is all about, and he was the gentleman who coined the term UFO crash retrieval. And over a 30-year time period, he collected and compiled dozens and dozens of firsthand military witnesses, people who were on the X-ray teams, people who did the autopsies, medical personnel, military personnel that retrieved the bodies and the craft, other personnel who loaded the craft onto trailers and shipped them to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. That's the caliber of witnesses that Leonard dealt with.
I remember reading his crash and retrieval syndrome white papers when I started getting into this, and I found them just absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
But of course, that was many years ago. And I still, to this day, well, what I find fascinating now, even more so, is that people are really looking at the Stringfield materials, and you've paid some particular attention to that.
Absolutely. Personally, I think it's the most bombshell information out there. I really do, because he got closer than anyone. He was basically one remove from the military witnesses. And we're talking about dozens and dozens in here. I counted 119 cases total. All we need is one to be correct. That's all we need.
One of the things that I remember about those papers, those white papers, were the sketches that were purportedly done by the physicians that had done the autopsies. And it just sent a shiver up my spine, because I was looking at these sketches thinking to myself, my gosh, these could actually be accurate portrayals of a being from another world.
Yeah, that's what I want to address in this presentation, is because when you go through that book that has all the status reports bound into one volume, which is a rather expensive little booklet here. It's more than a booklet. It's a legitimate book, but it's not for the faint of heart. You have to have a real interest in this subject, because it's all heavy reading. There really are no drawings or illustrations or full color renderings. It's lacking that. So my crusade over the past 4 years was to commit this information to really good, professionally done sketches, and then use that as a guide to create full color renderings. That's been the goal here.
You've dedicated over 25 years now to investigating UFO encounters.
That's true.
And you emphasize the importance of preserving lost, forgotten, and obscure history. That's sort of what you are known for, and that is
yeah, I suppose so.
Peering into obscure history. What initially drew you to this field, to looking into this, and why do you believe that it's so vital to resurrect some of these older cases, looking at Leonard Stringfield's materials and so forth? Why are these cases particularly important?
Well, first of all, my passion has been aerospace my whole life. Aviation has been a prime focus of my entire life. From a very young age, my dad would take me to an old, you could call it, air museum outside, where they had these warbirds sitting out in the field, and they had weeds growing up through the wheel wells, and all the tires were flat, and the paint was chipped and flaked off and completely weathered, and all the flight controls had like a skeleton exterior. It just had this ghostly appeal. That was the start of my love of aviation, and it just kept going from there. Started interviewing test pilots and engineers, and then ran across these Stringfield cases and did a deep dive into all that information. And I kept thinking, someone's got to get some pencil down on paper here. Let's see what these cases look like. I mean, it's good to use imagination, but I wanted to know what these things look like. So, it's a function of reading through the cases very carefully, and then referencing that information with other cases, and then working with my artist and vetting out all the details, making sure that we stay period correct and historically correct. And that's what we did. And the reason why I think this is important, because if we don't do this now, we are going to lose all of these legacy witnesses. And in the minds of the government, it'll be cover up complete. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to make not only these cases disappear, but anything prior to 2006 completely disappear off the radar screen. They're trying to rebrand UFOs as UAP and make anything prior to 2006 non-existent. I won't let them do it. So that's how we're going to roll.
Now, your method involves a meticulous review of these archives and creating detailed forensic illustrations.
That's correct.
And you want to my understanding, make these experiences come alive so people can understand what these objects looked like and so forth. So, Michael, would you mind walking us through your process for selecting a case
Yeah.
regardless of its historical nature that you want to illustrate, and what elements of a report are most crucial for you in creating those visual reconstructions?
Good. So the criteria that I use, and let's go back 15 years, QFOS was at one time, and we're talking about the J. Allen Hynek Research Center here, Center for UFO Studies, 2457 West Peterson Avenue, downtown Chicago, where they literally have 60,000 cases. And so it would be a function of driving up there on a Saturday, weekend time. No one else used the library, which was always shocking to me. There was nobody else there. We have all these files, and not one person took advantage of it. Like every time I was there was nobody else there. So I went through every single file cabinet, every single drawer, every single manila folder, and literally every single file, all the pages. And what I use is if the case had a sketch, a drawing, an illustration, a 3-page report, and then a flight path, I copied it. It had to meet that criteria. If it didn't have that, I didn't copy it. I'm not interested in CE1 cases where a light's in the sky. I wanted a real piece of hardware. I wanted something that had structure to it, a good drawing. And so from there, I would redraw it in SolidWorks and then burn an AutoCAD drawing, a 3-view, and then I would use that as a basis to do a full color rendering. And that's the process I took.
Amazing. And I suspect, and I might know that you've come up with some pretty fascinating images and reproductions of some of these cases.
Hope so. That's the goal here. I mean, we already paid for this stuff one time. So technically we own it, right? Because the government doesn't own anything. They're nothing more than a temporary custodian of these assets. We'll talk about that later. But, ultimately it's our tax dollars that are going into these projects.
I completely agree with that. I think one of the problems is, as you know, in this particular field, especially when you're looking at, the possibility of alien reproduction vehicles and so forth, that this technology will be claimed by private corporations. And that's part of the reason that we're having such great difficulty in, disclosure, because this is a lot of this information is proprietary and beyond the Freedom of Information Act, but you have been able to gather a tremendous amount of information over the years, and you're able to discern, to my understanding, between aircraft that, or purported aircraft that are advanced and part of perhaps a DARPA program or something like that, and those that could possibly really be from another place, extraterrestrial perhaps, or far beyond known technology. Is that a fair assessment, or
that's a fair assessment, and you're absolutely correct. A lot of this information is it's no longer classified, it's proprietary. And when you have a proprietary program, for instance, the Boeing Phantom Works Bird of Prey that was declassified October 2002 under the Bush administration, that's a kind of program where you can't FOIA that. You can't really touch that because that's Boeing proprietary.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what a lot of this information is. It's no longer classified. It's been moved over to the defense contractors, just like you talked about. But getting back to your other point, is there is a laundry list of things to look at to help one to determine if it's ours or theirs. So a couple of quick examples. Number one, test it on a Thursday night. Number one. Number two, tubes, pipes, and cylinders on the bottom of the craft. Number three, lights that go off in sequence. So you have the reds go off, the blues go off, the yellows go off, the whites go off, and then it repeats the cycle. A low frequency electrical humming noise like a transformer or a sewing machine. So if you hear that flying overhead, that's something to be aware of. Other things, we always have this high-pitched drilling noise that pops up on so many cases. Fasteners, so you have socket head cap screws, you have hex head cap screws, you've got weld seams. If you see any of these things, be very suspect.
And the reason for that being, well, perhaps you could explain some of that. For example, bolts and seams and things like that. Why would we not expect that, considering that all of the alien spacecraft on television clearly have seams?
Well, it's a very good indicator of a man-made technology. Now, we do have some cases where people have identified literally hex head bolts from Ace Hardware. Literally, I mean, not my words, the witness words. They actually said it looked identical to a hex head bolt, like on a scissor joint, that was mentioned. So when you hear things like this, or you hear things about being tested on a Thursday night, that's another telltale sign of a man-made craft, because I would say from the early 1980s to way up until the mid 1990s, there were a lot of craft that were tested on Thursday nights. Now, why is that significant? Because Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is pre-flight. Thursday's the test flight. Friday's debrief. There's no one at the base Saturday and Sunday. And that happened with the Hudson Valley Boomerang and many other cases. So that's why Thursdays are very important.
Well, and you mentioned some other characteristics in there, and
Sure.
and one of them was a humming noise.
Yep, the humming noise. You have CE2 type effects where engines get stalled out, car radios have static. You definitely have a humming noise. Now, when you have a real ET spacecraft, a lot of times people say these things are absolutely silent. They make no noise. There's no seams. They don't need wings because, going back to what Stanton Friedman said, lights on an ET spacecraft could only be for decoration. They don't need lights. They don't need red, green, blue lights on the bottom of their craft. There's no reason for it. It's only for decoration, which is pointing to our man-made origin of this.
So, what about humming noises? That to me would indicate some kind of a propulsion mechanism. But is there some sort of, and I don't want to say anti-gravitic, but electrogravitic craft out there that may be making these kinds of noises? I mean, I'm assuming that's what you're getting at. So we have craft that can do this.
In its simplest terms, when people describe, for instance, the boomerangs, the triangles, the flying platforms, which are now the rage now, when these things fly overhead, people report this humming noise like a sewing machine, and then they report the hair on their head, the hair on their chest, the hair on their arms stands up, and they're completely encased in a static electrical field. So what we're talking about here is high voltage electrical charges here. That's what we're talking about, which is another sign of a man-made technology.
Are we talking about the like an extrapolation of the Byfield Brown effect or something
You could factor that in. I'll give you a couple of quick examples. So you've got 1989, 1990 Belgium Triangle. People reported pipes and tubes and cylinders on the bottom of that thing. It was the size of a football field. It had beaming spotlights coming down. They definitely reported this low frequency humming noise. Similar humming noise was heard on the January 5th Southern Illinois Triangle, which had what were termed stacked Legos. And then if you just go back to Hudson Valley Boomerang, 82 to 89, we've got transparent panels on the bottom of these things where you could see the cross beam and girder construction. You see the tubes, pipes, and cylinders on the bottom. We've got the electrical humming noise. So these are very good candidates for a man-made technology.
Wouldn't you also say that these particular characteristics, compared to what we could attribute to an ET craft, that they denote completely different forms of manufacture? That
Sure.
We're talking about completely not only different propulsion technologies, but clearly materials and manufacturing technologies as well.
Well, the witnesses talk about how these authentic craft appear to be built like stacked atoms. on a 3D printer, literally down to the atomic level. There's no sharp corners, there's no sharp edges, everything has a smooth fillet radius, and it's like someone stacked atoms upon each other and made this fully integrated craft. That's what we're looking at here with the actual authentic articles.
So some folks are seeing things that can clearly be attributed to, some sort of man-made technology, and we're also seeing some things that maybe didn't come from here. I know that a lot of reports that we get include craft that sometimes have some sort of an effluent coming out of the back, which to me seems like another reason we might look at that skeptically, to say, well, would an ET craft require some sort of a action reaction engine? But then again, in the Lonnie Zamora case, it seems like maybe they used it to just temporarily take off, because remember there was a report about the flames coming out. What's your take on the Zamora case?
On the bottom of the egg-shaped craft, there was a blue-colored flame that tracks with the Cash Landrum incident. So, you can just start piecing all this together. And the other thing to keep in mind is the United States Government Intelligence Agency, they would love for everyone to believe that all this is ET, because what they're doing is they're painting these sightings with the UFO brush to hide their own deep black programs. That's what they're doing. They would love for all of us to believe that this is all ET. That's not the case.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what a perfect cover.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that you've looked into is the Roswell incident, and I think to a certain extent the Stringfield files may be, related to that, not completely, but perhaps some of the technology and bodies that are referenced in those materials came from Roswell. And but there was some particularly compelling interest or interesting information regarding the child size of the beings, and I just wrote something down here, prompting Lieutenant Governor Montoya's shock and remark, "They weren't human." Can you elaborate on that?
Well, a lot of this boils down to witness testimony, right? There are no 509th Bomb Group members left anymore. They're all dead. So we're now beyond chasing the Undertaker, as Stanton used to put it. In the minds of the government, it's cover up complete. But we do have the testimony of people like Happy Henderson. He flew at least one body and portions of the debris in a C-54 directly to Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. So, is this guy lying to us? Why would this pilot with incredible credentials lie to us? And then if we track that with Marion Mac Black Magruder, who was an ace pilot and taught American pilots how to fly during the nighttime, he claimed that in April 1948, not only did he see the survivor from Roswell, but he saw the dead corpses as well. So he saw both. Are we to believe that he's lying to us? I don't know. I interviewed his son, Merritt. It's been 6 years now. He gave me all his father's original notes, told him exactly what his father told him, and he's a very believable witness.
Amazing. Now, these cases that you've been looking at and making illustrations for, do you want to get into some of that,
let's get into
and
it.
show us some of the illustrations that you've been working on, and tell us what they're about?
Great. The title of this lecture is called Retrievals of the Third Kind: Cosmic Crashes, Corpses, and Cover-Ups. And this is an homage to Leonard Stringfield. Let's move on to the next slide here, and hopefully this will track for us. UFO Crash Retrieval is the ultimate holy grail of UFO research. So why am I calling it the ultimate holy grail? Well, if you boil it down, it's very simple, because it is the crash retrievals that contains the bodies, the debris, and the craft all up in one entity.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm saying is that this is going to be the vehicle that facilitates disclosure. We don't need any CE1 cases anymore. What we need is hard physical evidence to move this field forward. Anything less than that, then you and me and everyone else listening to this is going to be here another 50 years, and we still won't know what's going on because the government's going to keep on kicking the can down the road. We've already tried the democratic process for 80 years, and so far it has failed us because a lot of the people, let's say House Armed Services Committee, they don't have a high enough security clearance and they've not been read into these programs. So how can they get access and declassify something they've never been briefed on? They don't have a high enough security clearance. That's the brick wall we're running into. And that's why the so-called cosmic Watergate is still in place, because no one can penetrate this. And so that's why it's the crash retrieval cases that are the most important. Absolutely the most important. I'm going to move on to the next slide here. And is this tracking on your end?
It is.
Good. Okay. A couple of quick announcements. Number one, the content of each case highlighted in this presentation has remained intact per the description of the original source. The identity of first-hand sources will be protected per Leonard Stringfield's original agreement with his military contacts. The visual aids used in this presentation are computer-generated forensic composite illustrations and sketches which originated from the specific details provided by Leonard's sources. So I want to give you a cross-section of the caliber of witnesses that Leonard dealt with here. So we've got 3-star U.S. Air Force generals, U.S. Air Force fighter pilots, astronauts, commercial pilots, air traffic controllers, neurosurgeons, pathologists, theoretical physicists, and mathematicians, U.S. Army officers, U.S. Navy officers, military police, high-level Pentagon officials, top military brass, scientists and engineers who worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and other government facilities. So again, this is the caliber of military witnesses. These are the kind of people that you want on your team to be coming forward with this information.
Can I ask you something,
go ahead.
Michael, before we go on to the next one? How did Leonard Stringfield manage to cultivate such high-level witnesses and people that were willing to discuss this? How did he contact and cultivate these relationships?
Because over a 30-year time period, he was always known to be a reliable gentleman who did not reveal their identities. And so they felt safe coming to him. And that's the agreement that Leonard made with his witnesses, is that he could preserve an important part of our national history, but the names had to remain anonymous. And he followed that all the way until he died in 94. And that's why these witnesses felt safe with him. Okay, so quotes, UFO crash retrievals can't be real because if they were, I would have read about it in the local newspaper. That's number one. You know, a lot of the times people just can't believe this because we're not reading about this. Well, we got to go back to think that the whole subject of UFO crash retrievals during World War II and afterward is really classified above top secret. It was classified higher than the atomic bomb during World War II. We're talking about the crown jewels here. And so that's how Timothy Good got his name for his book, Above Top Secret. That's where that comes from. That's how high level this was classified. Number two, there are not now nor ever have been any extraterrestrial visitors or equipment on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And this is their press release, not mine, theirs, July 1980. So they make the claim that we don't have anything. We don't have any debris. We don't have any hardware. We don't have any bodies. We don't have any craft secreted away in any underground hangars at Wright-Patterson. We don't have anything like that. But what we want to do here is we're going to take Leonard Stringfield's firsthand military witnesses and we're going to go up against the United States Air Force and we'll see who comes out on top. I'm going to move to the next slide here. And so what we have here is a picture of Leonard Stringfield. This is the man of the hour. And over a 30-year period, he identified dozens of these firsthand military witnesses who dealt with crash retrievals. We kind of talked about this before. We're talking about X-ray technicians, pathologists, medical doctors, people who handled the debris, people who dealt with the hardware, people who analyzed the bodies, people who were in charge of loading things up and shipping them to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and other medical centers. That's the kind of people that Leonard dealt with here. We want to talk a little bit about his bio. I mean, it doesn't make sense to just jump right in. We've got to talk about who this man was. Born in 1920, grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. By the time he graduated from high school in 1939, he already memorized the entire dictionary. And they gave him a nickname. They called him Webster because this is the gentleman who literally memorized the entire dictionary. I can't think of a better person to be cataloging all these witnesses. Next one here. He joined the military as soon as he heard about the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. During World War II, Leonard served in the intelligence service of the 5th Air Force in the Southwest Pacific Theater. He wrote 2 books, Inside Saucer Post 3-0 back in 1957, Situation Red, the UFO Siege back in 1977. He served as director of the world's largest UFO research group in the mid-1950s, Civilian Research Interplanetary Flying Objects. He received 8,000 letters in the first 2 weeks of existence. So there was a lot of interest when all this was very new material back then. Next point is what we want to talk about here. His lecture on UFO crash retrievals at the 1978 MUFON Symposium in Dayton, Ohio, caused an international sensation. So why did it cause an international sensation? A couple of reasons. Number one, back in 1978, Roswell and the whole concept of UFO crash retrievals was a very new entity back then. It was just coming upon the public radar screen. And number two, when he delivered this lecture, there was a lot of pushback. There were people that were mad. And it got serious because there was no way to independently verify the comments and statements that Leonard was making in reference to his firsthand witnesses, because the agreement he made is their names and identities had to remain anonymous. He would not give up their names. So there was a lot of pushback, and that's why it was a very significant meeting. He passed away December 18th, 1994. So it's been such a long time now. It's really been a long time. We'll continue on. This is the next slide here. What was the one event that sparked Leonard's interest in UFOs, which ultimately changed the course of his entire life? So there was one event that changed his entire trajectory. And I'm going to move to the next slide here, and you can kind of see here. August 30th, 1945, Leonard had a Foo Fighters sighting from inside a twin-engine C-47 while traveling from Okinawa to Iwo Jima. So here you see Leonard inside the twin-engine aircraft. They actually saw 2 Foo Fighters. They were over the ocean. One of the engines conked out. They thought they were going to ditch. And then when this Foo Fighter peeled away and zoomed away, engine came back on. They landed carefully in Iwo Jima without any further problems. But this one event changed his whole life forever. He never forgot it. It was the instigation of his research. It really was. So we'll do a little bit of newspaper clipping here. Newcastle Sun, January 3rd, 1945. Foo Fighters are latest. Pilots flying over Germany at night report that strange balls of fire are following them around on their missions. They have christened these strange phenomenon Foo Fighters. So this is just a confirmation that this was going on during World War II, no doubt about it. Cincinnati Enquirer, July 19th, 1993. Author continues quest for truth about UFOs. Quote, what I've collected has staggering implications for mankind. This would be the biggest thing since Christ, really. Now, you think about how big of a statement that is. I mean, that's a very bold statement. It's like way out there. But he is correct, because if we can prove even one of these cases is authentic, it would be the biggest thing since Christ. Let's move on to the next slide. Leonard maintained a collection of 22 bank boxes of original correspondence, letters, drawings, audio tapes, testimony from his sources. These witnesses should be located and their testimony should be presented before Congress. I fear it's too late because this original material is now lost. I've been looking for it for 14 years. I can't track it down. I've been told that it's been thrown out, and that may be the case because it had the original letters, the original names, addresses, and phone numbers of all of Leonard Stringfield's military contacts. But he was a truthful man all the way till his dying day. He refused to let the names out. So we have to deal with what we have right now and track down as many of these legacy witnesses as we can. We just have to proceed as planned with what we have. So let me take you really quickly to the 1978 MUFON Symposium. So what you're looking at here is the convention center. I'm going to move to the next slide. I'm going to take you inside now. And here you see Leonard giving his lecture, Retrievals of the Third Kind, where he presented a number of these firsthand military witnesses. I'm going to move on here. And this is really the heart of the matter here. Front page of Leonard Stringfield's MUFON Symposium, July 1978. Here it says, Retrievals of the Third Kind, a case study of alleged UFO and occupants in military custody, presented by Leonard Stringfield. And this is a very lengthy paper. I mean, it's pushing 100 pages. He put a lot of time into this, and he highlighted a minimum of 12 of his firsthand military witnesses. And that's what this whole paper is all about. So in my presentation, I've included a number of these cases, but then I went a lot further and illustrated as many of the mission critical cases through his entire 7 status reports from beginning to end, picked out the best ones and had those illustrated. Let's continue on. Now, hopefully people can see this next slide here.
Yes.
This is the cover of his book, UFO Crash Retrievals, the Complete Investigation Status Reports 1 through 7 by Leonard Stringfield, 1978 to 1994. I urge anyone that's hearing this, if you have an interest in what's really going on, the bodies, the crash retrievals, the cases, the hardware, the biologics that they talk about. This tracks exactly with the congressional hearings. If you want to really get an inside track on what happened with crash retrievals, this is absolutely the Rosetta Stone. You want to take it to David Grush and beyond, this is the book that will do it because it's got 119 crash retrieval cases. It talks about the dates, the locations, what happened, where the bodies were sent. The problem with this book is, I mean, it's very text intensive. You have to really have an interest in this subject. There's almost no drawings. There's literally no illustrations. There's no full color renderings. So someone, I don't know if it matters who it is, someone had to go through this publication with a fine-tooth comb, pick out the most mission critical cases, commit those to a professionally done, refined drawing, and then finish up with a full color 3D rendering. And that, Richard, has been my crusade the last 4 years. And I think we finally accomplished it here. Other one to keep in mind is, so we've got 119 crash retrieval cases in Leonard's publication. We move on to Ryan Wood's book, MAJIC Eyes Only, Earth's Encounters with Extraterrestrial Technology. There's an additional, Richard, 104 crash retrieval cases. So when we bring these two together, now we've got some serious firepower, right? We always hear in these hearings, we don't have any evidence.
Can I
We
assume
don't have
that
any hardware. All they got to do is look into these books and start digging, and you'll find out how many crash retrieval cases. All of these things need to be run to ground. Practically none of these have been researched to the degree they need to be. I mean, I don't have those kind of financial resources. I don't think anyone in ufology has those kind of financial resources to track down any remaining parents or children or debris or do an archaeological dig. I don't have the capability to do that, but that's what these cases need. And they're just begging for that kind of research to be done. So much virgin material here. All right, so before we jump into the cases with the drawings and illustrations, let me take everyone to Las Vegas here. And I want to take you to the Caesars Palace Casino here. on the strip, and we're going to go to the roulette wheel, and we're going to go to the roulette wheel that has 120 spaces on it, and we're going to bet 119 bets, one for each of Leonard Stringfield's cases, and we're going to spin this roulette wheel here. And I think, Richard, you can see where I'm going here.
Yes.
The math is in our favor. We can't lose. It's 119 to 1 in our favor. We can't lose. The burden of proof is on the government, not us. We got the cases. So all we need is one of these cases to be authentic, and the whole concept of UFO crash retrieval non-existence completely falls apart. The numbers, Richard, are in our favor.
I have to agree with that. I think a lot of us have felt that way for a really long time. The problem with that, of course, is getting a fair hearing.
Sure. That's right.
That's the tough part. But let's keep going
on here. Now, isn't it, Richard, wonderful? And isn't it lovely, Richard, that in this country we have something called the First Amendment? It's our right to free speech. So in other words, what I'm saying is we have every right to question authority. And we talked about this a little bit before. The government doesn't own anything. And what that means is, if you extrapolate that to its furthest degree here, the government, we'll just take, for example, Edwards Air Force Base. They don't own the Air Force Base. They don't own the runways. They don't own the buildings, the airplanes, all the facilities. They don't own that. The taxpayers do. Taxpayers own all of that. The taxpayers own the buildings. We pay for the salaries of the employees there. We own the aircraft because we paid for them. So what that means is, I love it. It's the government is nothing more than a temporary custodian of those assets. They don't own anything. We own it. We have every right to question authority. And that's what the point I want to make here. Now, let's get over to David Grush. This is July 26, 2023. In the center, we've got David Grush, U.S. Air Force Intelligence. Off to the left on the slide, Ryan Graves, Navy pilot. Off to the right, David Fravor, Navy pilot. If anyone thinks that David Fravor is lying, then I got a bridge to sell you on the San Andreas Fault. Let's continue on here. So here we have David Grush and his quote: "I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval program," end quote. This is directly from David Grush. So he's confirming in open congressional hearings that we have a multi-decade crash retrieval program. This is tracking exactly with Leonard Stringfield's firsthand military witnesses. They're going hand in hand. It's a perfect match. Here we have Waterloo Region record, July 27th, 2023. Whistleblower says multi-decade program that captured UFOs is being concealed. So here we have another newspaper article talking about this, confirming this classified super secret UFO crash retrieval program. It's confirming it here. Let's continue on. I want to give credit to my good friend Rudy Gardea, who did all the sketch pencil work, which was used for the basis. None of this would have been possible without his sketches, because we need a good baseline to start all of this. So, Richard, why don't we go ahead and we're going to move on to the next slide. And this is our first case, one of the very early Leonard Stringfield cases. Now, this is 1942, prior to Roswell. This is 5 years before Roswell, at an Army base north of Georgia that even Leonard didn't know where this was. So he didn't know all the details on these cases, but he did the best he could with what he had. This is page 319. So as we go through here, I'm going to give you the page number where you can verify this in the book so you can check it out on your own. Page 319. The witness served in a key civil capacity. Craft measured 15 feet in diameter. It was 10 feet high. When this thing came down at an Army base north of Georgia, it hit the side of the facility and ripped a hull breach on the side of the craft. Again, 15 feet in diameter, 10 feet high. Now, the only way, Richard, that this works, if you do the math here, is that there were three main areas, and this is talked about in the report. Number one, there was a seating area. There was a control area, and then there was a lower section with an entryway hatch. So The only way this actually works then is if there's this huge cavernous interior, and then there's a sub-basement with an entryway hatch. Now, there were 4 crew members, and they were taken alive. One was female. They were 5 feet tall, 90 pounds, large black eyes, milky white skin. Now, also want to mention that there was hieroglyphic type writing written along the outer circumference of the craft itself. And the report said that there was hieroglyphic writing written on the inside wall of the upper dome. Let me go to the next slide here. Here's the blow up of this writing here. Now, I'm thinking, and I hope people agree, that there's got to be this transnational team of linguistic experts and engineers who are expertly trying to decipher and decode what these symbols mean. There has to be. By default, there has to be a group doing this. They probably got big 3-ring binders, maybe 8 inches thick, multiple, that are cross-referencing and trying to figure out what all these symbols mean. Let me go and take you inside the facility now. So we're going to use Rudy's drawing as a guide, but let me take you inside the facility. I'm going to walk you up the steps. We're going to go inside the craft. I'm going to show you the interior seating area, and then I'm going to also show you the control area, and then we're going to continue on. I'm going to show you the bodies too. All right, so let's continue here. So this is the exterior of the craft, and you've got all these symbols on the outer section, and this is at an Army base north of Georgia in 1942. All right, so here's the hull breach on the side of the craft, because it specifically said that in the report that when this thing came down, it just ripped a hole right in the side of this thing. So there was damage, no doubt about it. Let me take you up the stairs now. We're going to move over to the central divider. So now we're inside. We're going to move off to the left, and then we're going to move off to the right. Let me move on to the next slide here. So what we're looking at now is the seating area, and you can kind of see on the inside wall, you've got additional hieroglyphic type writing. Let's move on to the next one. Off to the upper section here. This is a little bit higher resolution image that shows you the seating area. You've got the hieroglyphic type writing. Now we're going to move over to the right, Richard, with the next slide, and I'm going to show you the control area. Now, again, we're just doing the best we can with the information that we have from Stringfield's witness. We'll do one quick blow up here, and this is what we came up with for this interior control area. We'll do one more blow up, and this is perhaps what they saw back in 1942, a long time before Roswell. This is something that was recovered. Okay, now let me take you to the bodies here. You can see the bodies. They were wearing a one-piece tight-fitting flight suit. They had oversized head, oversized eyes, slit for a mouth, minute nose. One, according to the report, was female. This is a little bit more of a blow up. I'm going to move to the next slide here, and we're going to do one more blow up. This gives you an idea here. The one in the foreground, I have to call it like it was said in the report. It had breasts. So we believe that there was one female with at least 3 other males within this retrieval operation. Okay, next slide. Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, 1946. It had not become Wright-Patterson Air Force Base until 1947, when the Army Air Corps broke away and became the U.S. Air Force back in 1947. The source for this is Tex Martin. He was only 6 years old at the time, but his father was with him at the same time. So we don't have to rely on the testimony of a 6-year-old child. We have his father too. Page 242, 243 in the book. Now, what you're looking at here, Richard, is a period correct photograph of hangar complex number 4 at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which has 5 bays. So you've got A, B, C, and D. A, B, C, D, and E. E is on the farthest right. I believe it took place in Bay E. I can't prove it, but I believe it's true. Move on to the next slide. So you've got this 6-year-old boy with his father. They're inside an adjoining cafeteria to the main hangar. There's a janitor there that sees this fine young man, and he says, you know what? This boy seems like a nice boy. Why don't I buy him a soda pop? So he hands him this soda pop. I'm going to move on to the next slide here. And Concurrently, when he hands this 6-year-old boy, Tex Martin, this soda pop, one of the military personnel within the hangar walks right through this door, and now our witness is looking inside the doorway into the hangar. And what does he see, Richard? I'm going to move on to the next slide, and this is all roughed out by Rudy here. He sees two 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy trucks with unknown type tarp debris. He sees military personnel. There's an Army Jeep in there. Then he said there was an 18-foot diameter dish-shaped craft that was off-white in color that had two rings wrapped around the outer circumference sitting on tripod landing gear legs. And then he said that there were 3 ET corpses on stretchers laying on the hangar floor. This is according to Tex Martin. I'm going to go to the next slide. We're reversing the viewing perspective. Now you can see our witness in the background here, but let's clean this up. Let me take you to our refined drawing here. And this is what Rudy came up with for the refined drawing. So 20-foot diameter dish-shaped craft with tripod landing gear legs, 2 rings wrapped around the outer circumference. We had military personnel. He said absolutely without question, there were 2 large 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy trucks with unknown tarp debris. And then there were at least 3 deceased ET corpses on stretchers laying on the hangar floor. So the goal here is to preserve an important part of our national history, make these cases come alive. I'm going to move to the next slide to show you our full color rendering. And Richard, this is what we came up with. These are what these witnesses are telling us that they're seeing. All right, let's continue on here. Same place, same time frame. Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, 1946. Our witness is a private who worked in records management. Source is Space, the Final Frontier, page 59 by Clark McClellan. I want to give you the front cover of his book so that I'm documenting where I'm getting this information. Now, within this publication was this sketch right here. This is from the first-hand military witness. Now, this craft arrived from Arkansas, Richard, on a railroad flat car. It was 15 feet in diameter. It was 7 feet tall. Had a highly polished mirror reflective exterior. There was no visible means of propulsion, no wings, no ailerons, no flight controls. There were no socket head cap screws, no hex head cap screws, no welds of any kind, like antiseptically sterile. He said that there was a series of rectangular windows wrapped around the outer circumference of the craft itself. Now, let me go to our SolidWorks rendering. This is my AutoCAD drawing. And if you look on the upper right-hand corner, you can see I peeled back the skin showing you this central column that was about 3 feet in diameter that went from the base of the craft through the midpoint, terminated at the top of the craft. Now, if you look left of center on my bottom view, you're going to see a window with a red dot, Richard. That is the attempted point of entry with diamond tip drill bits. They were desperately trying to get into this thing with diamond tip drill bits. And I've got 4 other cases within the Stringfield collection that talk about these diamond tip drill bits that these lab coat technicians are using to pierce into these things, and they can't do it. They can't get inside. This was the very first past color illustration that I put together just to give people an idea of what this thing actually looks like. Now, let me take it to the next level here. This is my friend Joseph Wraith in his rendering. He's peeled back the skin, showing you this central column. But again, I mean, this thing was antiseptically sterile, virtually no seams whatsoever. He's even got the red dot on the window left of center. So again, they were absolutely trying to get into these things for obvious reasons, right? What's the propulsion system? What's the energy system? Can we weaponize this? Can we exploit the technology for our own military gain? Obviously, that's what they were doing here. All right.
Were they able to penetrate this particular craft? Or showing the central shaft there, but so I'm were they able to penetrate it?
No, they weren't. I did that just to show people what this thing actually looks like. The report didn't say anything about them getting inside. So to my knowledge, they never got inside. And now this is back in 1946. You would hope, or you would think, that by now They might have been able to open some of these up. The only thing that I've ever heard where they're successful on this is when they take these craft and they drop them into a vat of liquid nitrogen. They cold shock it, and then they can get inside. That's the only way they can do it. So you literally have to do some very serious analysis and some serious things to get in. Now, back to our case here. So we've got a private who worked in records management. He had a friend who was a military police, and he had to deliver this letter to one of these high-level military brass. So when his friend saw his records management guy walking into this hangar, he said, you know what? I got something I want to show you. So he brings him back to the hangar and he shows him this craft, which you see in Rudy's drawing. Off to the right on the floor, there was a tarp partially folded up. In the foreground, there was an open toolbox. Off to the left of the toolbox, there was an electric drill with a diamond tip drill bit. So what he had done is he had come to the right place at the right time when they were changing shifts between the white lab coat technicians. And he got there perfect timing. He got a good look at this thing and he saw it. Let me take you to our full color rendering here. And this is what we came up with. Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, 1946. For all I know, Richard, it could still be there now, along with all the other craft that they've kept there over the decades. It's very possible. Let's see if we can sneak in one more here. This is a letter from Nathan Twining to Air Force Brigadier General George Shulgin, September 23rd, 1947. It says, quote, the phenomenon reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious. Later on in this document, it talks about the form, fit, and function of these vehicles. It talks about the flight path of these vehicles. So this is a gentleman who had a need to know back in the late 1940s. So he would have known about these retrieval operations. All right, so Papagos Indian Reservation west of Globe, Arizona, January 1947. So we're already 3 and 4 in now, Richard. We haven't even made it to Roswell yet. Location is north of Superstition Mountains. The military witness served in the U.S. Navy during World War II. Page 93, case A10 in the book. Now, the push pin I've got on this map is approximately where this went down. If you look way off to the lower right, you can see Globe, Arizona. So it's way far west of Globe, Arizona, within the vicinity of the Superstition Mountains. All right, so let's go to the drawing. 2 witnesses, they're in a Jeep. They're going down an unimproved road. They are stopped by 2 MPs with carbides telling them, you're not supposed to be in here. This is a secure area. Get out of here immediately. But it was already too late because another 50 feet down the road off to the left, Richard, was a 30-foot diameter dish-shaped craft that augured in at about a 40-degree angle. There was a low-rise dome on top. There was 2 rings wrapped around the outer circumference of the craft itself, and then indented windows wrapped around the outer circumference. That pops up multiple times in other crash retrieval cases. Let me take you to the next slide. And again, this thing is 30 feet in diameter. It's 18 feet tall.
Can I ask you a question before we move on to the next one? Are these windows, or do they just simply, are we just interpreting them as windows, or are they, do they have some transparency, or is it possible that they have some other function?
We don't know for sure. Now, we can call them windows, but personally, I don't think they're windows. I think they're sensors of some kind. However, if you look at the historical cases where you have these quote unquote windows wrapped around the outer circumference, almost always they're illuminated from the interior and they're shining out of these window panes. So maybe there is transparency to it, or maybe that's associated with the propulsion system. But I think we could be looking at some type of sensor array wrapped around the outer circumference of these craft. So let me take you to our full color rendering here. And this is done by Joel Christopher Payne. Want to give him credit. And so you can see our witnesses here. They're being stopped. You've got the 6x6 troop transport off to the left. You've got the crash retrieval operation. So they literally were at the right place at the right time at the very beginning of this retrieval operation. Now I'm going to move on to the next one here. And it's important that we track down the bodies and the craft, but what about the hardware? What about the debris on a lot of these crash retrieval cases? We've got one Stringfield witness that mentions something in the files that has something to do with Foote Brothers Gear and Machine Company. So, according to Mr. Robert Helmold, Foote Brothers Gear and Machine Company of Chicago conducted metallurgical analysis on pieces from a flying saucer that crashed back in 1947. Is it the same one we just looked at? Very possible. I can't prove it for sure, but it's very possible. So, Richard, I wanted to do some digging and find out what this Foote Brothers Gear and Machine Company, what do they actually do? What do they make? So I started digging here. So this is Chicago Tribune, January 15th, 1955. It says it makes gears as large as 21 feet in diameter and weighing 45,000 pounds and others small enough to put on a watch chain. Its gears are found on airplanes of all types, including jets and helicopters. In a year, it will make thousands of different gears for use by industry. So, bottom line is, if the United States military recovered something in the Arizona desert that had an arc radius with teeth on it, evenly spaced, that reminded someone of a gear, they absolutely would have sent it to this place for analysis, because you can see what these guys actually did. So here is Hendricks Commercial Register 1909, and you can see here, Richard, the size of the gears that this company makes. I mean, they're life size.
Yep.
This is exactly the place that you want to bring it. Next slide here. Purchasing agent 1923. So by 1923, they were making these absolutely massive gears here. Next one, White Sands Missile Range, July 4th, 1947. Our source is a technical sergeant, U.S. Army Air Force. Crash retrieval, page 196. So if anyone wants to follow along or they want to look through the publication, page 196. Now, what you're looking at here is the boundary in yellow of White Sands Missile Range. It took place at the northern part of the boundary at night. So if I move to the next slide, here you see Rudy's drawing. This was a large craft. It was 150 feet in diameter. When it came down, it was tilted at a 30-degree angle. One thing I want to mention, and again, this is all at night. This entire scene was excruciatingly well lit. They had searchlights, they had spotlights, they had light-alls aimed on this thing. They had military personnel with Geiger counters walking around this craft. They had people with still cameras snapping shots of this craft. They had other people with motion picture film cameras rolling film of all this. Bottom line, it was absolutely well documented. I'm going to move on to the next slide here. Here, this shows you the nighttime retrieval operation. And again, all of this was recorded. So the point I'm making here is that if we move to the next slide, what is the actionable item that we want to take away here? Since still photography and motion picture film was recorded of this event, senators and congressmen with the appropriate security clearances should track down and utilize this evidence for future public hearings. Yeah, that's exactly the problem that we're running into is that these senators and congressmen, they don't have a need to know and they don't have a high enough security clearance. So how can they get access to this information and declassify it if they don't have a high enough security clearance? We are dead from the very beginning. That's why these congressional hearings have not gone anywhere, because the people there, they don't have a high enough security clearance. They've never been briefed into this. They've never been read into these programs. I think we got time for one more here. UFO Crash Retrieval 1947, seen in a warehouse at Berkeley University. We have the name of this witness. He's deceased now. His name is Albert Bruce Collins. He was a metallurgical engineer. Page 197 in the book. I'm going to move on to the next slide here. He was at the right place at the right time when this 18-wheeler tractor trailer lowboy truck backed into the warehouse at Berkeley, and you see him in Rudy's drawing here. What he described was a 30-foot long egg-shaped craft, 15 feet tall, sitting on the flatbed trailer here as it's backing in. And he said that it literally looked, Richard, like a cracked egg from the top all the way down to the bottom. The forward part of this craft had a composite panel. In the center of this egg, there was a yoke that was 36 inches in diameter. Wrapped around the outer circumference of this interior yoke was another composite panel that really hugged around the outer circumference of this interior section. Now, he also mentioned that there was a hull breach on the side of the craft with shrapnel sticking out, like there was an internal implosion. Again, this thing is 30 feet across, 15 feet high. Let me take you to our full color rendering. And this is what was seen at Berkeley University. We're talking 1947 timeframe here. So, Richard, in this presentation, what I wanted to do is just give you a brief overview of some of these mission-critical crash retrieval cases that were compiled by Leonard Stringfield and really preserve an important part of our national history through the use of drawings and illustrations.
Well, I really appreciate that. That was really overwhelming. And one of the things I do want to ask you before we go is I want to ask you a little question about the yoke
Sure.
in this illustration. Now, when you say a yoke, is this thing a metallic sphere simply floating in midair inside
we don't know for sure what
this
the
thing?
material makeup of it was, but he said it was about 36 inches in diameter, and it was the center of the egg itself. That's how he described it. And he described that there was a panel that wrapped around the outer portion of this interior yoke. That's how he described it. And you can see here in Joel's illustration, the bottom right with the shrapnel coming out of it. So was this thing blown up with a howitzer? Was there an internal implosion? We don't know for sure, but there was some type of implosion here. Something went wrong. We can clearly see that here.
That's just amazing. I have to tell you that I really appreciate you doing that work because,
Sure.
Anyone who's interested in this topic, we all want to see better information, and really it brings us a little bit closer to standing right there, going, "Oh my gosh, this thing is right in front of me."
Right.
It's the next best thing.
It's the next best thing. Yeah. I can't take you to the bodies in the craft, but this is the best I can do.
Right. One of the things that I'm kind of interested in before we go is just I'd like you to briefly mention your interest in USOs and how that has sort of been overlooked in the study of this phenomenon, even though it's being talked about a little bit more.
Sure. Well, we know that 51% of all UFO cases are in point of fact USO cases. It's the forgotten part of ufology. Now, Richard, thankfully, anyone who knows about this phenomenon knows that whatever these UFOs are, they're tricksters because they can materialize and dematerialize at will. They can fly into oceans and pop back out at will. They've been seen flying into the side of mountains with no impact. So I don't think we're necessarily talking about material hardware in some of these cases. And that's why the USO stuff is so important. The Navy's been tracking this for decades. They know about this. They probably retrieved many things. We've got that confirmed by multiple military witnesses where things have been brought out of the ocean. Very highly classified type things. Ivan T. Sanderson did a whole book on USOs called Invisible Residents. I highly recommend that. You cannot put that book down, walk away, and think there's nothing to this phenomenon after reading that book with an open mind.
Well, Michael, I have to tell you that I appreciate you being with us here tonight.
Sure.
I really do.
No problem.
And I hope we get a chance to talk again soon. I'm sure that we will, because I'm going to see you at the symposium this summer, and I'm really looking forward to your presentation. I'm sticking around for the whole thing from beginning to end this year, not leaving until Monday. So I'm going to make sure and touch base with everyone, and I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk. But I want to tell you how much I appreciate you being here with us tonight.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Great.
All right. Thanks, Michael. I'll be back in a few moments with some afterthoughts.
MUFON 2025.
Get the live stream.
Nothing will prepare you for what we are going to reveal. Get the live stream. The Russian materials. The results are in. Bob Spearing.
It also showed signs that it had come in from space and that it had come in at a fast velocity through our atmosphere. Within the actual substance, there was a crystalline sort of structure to it that seemed to be organic and possibly growing.
The Stringfield Diaries. Early psionics.
This is the story of secret government programs designed to interact with non-human beings using psychic abilities and to shoot down craft with a weapon. That weapon was codenamed
Government Secrets Exposed. Get the live stream. Michael Schratt. Retrievals of the Third Kind. Thomas Jane.
Technium will take on a life of its own. It'll become its own self-organizing system with goals.
MUFON 2025. Get the live stream. Only $99. That includes a year of access to MUFON TV. Nothing will prepare you for what we are going to reveal. Get the live stream.
Get the live stream. Nothing will prepare you for what we are going to reveal.
Get the live stream. Go to MUFONsymposium.com/now.
Get the live stream. Nothing will prepare you.
Get the live stream.
Our discussion today highlights Michael Schratt's dedication to preserving and illustrating historical UFO crash retrieval cases, particularly those compiled by Leonard Stringfield. Schratt clearly sees Stringfield's work, which contains dozens of first-hand military witnesses, as containing, quote, most bombshell information out there and getting closer than anyone to the military witnesses. A key part of Michael's meticulous work is creating detailed forensic illustrations based on these historical reports because the original materials often lack drawings or illustrations, making them heavy reading and not for the faint of heart. He aims to make these historical experiences come alive and show people what these objects and beings purportedly looked like. He uses criteria such as reports including a sketch, drawing, illustration, a multi-page report, and a flight path to select cases for illustration, focusing on reports of actual hardware with structure and not just ephemeral lights in the sky. Michael considers UFO crash retrievals the ultimate holy grail of UFO research because they contain the craft, debris, and bodies, which he believes is the vehicle that will facilitate disclosure. He states that the entire subject of UFO crash retrievals during and after World War II was classified above top secret, even higher than the atomic bomb at the time. Despite official press releases claiming no extraterrestrial visitors or equipment are held at places like Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Schratt and Stringfield's witnesses contradict this. Michael cites David Grush's testimony about a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval program being concealed, stating this is tracking exactly what Leonard Stringfield's first-hand military witnesses said. Schratt is correct when he asserts that the government is nothing more than a temporary custodian of assets paid for by taxpayers, and therefore we own it and have every right to question authority. The argument for ending secrecy is rooted in the belief that the public has the right to know what their tax dollars have been funding, and what is arguably the most important part of human history. Michael maintains that even if one of these cases is authentic, it would be the biggest thing since Christ. Considering the profound implications of the UFO phenomenon, this is a sobering but accurate assessment nonetheless. The knowledge of it could completely destroy religion as we know it, perhaps even give rise to new religions and belief systems. Who knows? Maybe someday the visitors may have a thing or two to teach us about the nature of the universe we live in and the role we play within it. Please join us for the MUFON Symposium this July 17th through 21st in Cincinnati, Ohio, where Michael will be one of our featured speakers. For tickets, go to MUFONsymposium.com. Thank you for joining us. Once again, please remember to like, share, subscribe, and click the bell for notifications whenever we post fresh, new content. We'll see you next time, right here on the official MUFON Podcast.